Hey everyone, welcome back for another video. Today I'm going to be using the Paper Smooches dies and then a stamp from the Alleyway Stamps. I'm going to start with a piece of the watercolor paper from Tim Holtz, and I'm just cutting that down to fit an A2 size card base. And then I'm using three different distress inks. First I have the Picked Raspberry. Before I apply any ink to my paper, I'm just using my brush and then just placing some water onto the watercolor paper, and I'm just doing this kind of in a square shape, not a perfect square at all, but it's just so that it doesn't run towards the edges of my paper. And then my second color is the mustard seed, and if you just lightly tap it onto your paper, you'll get the ink on there. You don't have to really brush because I didn't want any brush strokes or anything. And then you kind of want to blend the colors together a little bit where they hit each other. The third color I'm using is the Mowed Lawn. And then I'll go ahead and use my heat tool to heat and set the colors onto my paper. Now when you heat this, your color might start to move around a little bit, but you can usually push it kind of right back into place with your heat tool. Now I didn't really like that little bump that stuck out on the side, so I just took my paintbrush with water on it and blended the color together so that it wasn't there anymore. And I'm going to go back now with the Picked Raspberry. I decided I want a little bit of splatter on there, so I'm just going to use my paintbrush and kind of flick it on the edge or end so that it creates those splatters. And I did this when the middle was still a little bit wet, so the splatters in the middle kind of feathered out a little bit. And then I'll just use my heat tool once again to dry all of that completely. And then you want to remember to heat the back a little bit. This will help prevent the warping that happens when the paper gets wet. It doesn't happen as much with watercolor paper, but it does a little bit. So next I'm going to use the Paper Smooches dies. These are the feather dies, and I'm going to cut them out of some vellum, and I just went ahead and trimmed the vellum down because it wouldn't fit through my Cuttlebug. Now since you're only cutting vellum and not cardstock, you might need a shim to go in there. I didn't with mine, but it just depends on how worn your cutting mat is. And then I'm going to take some Versamark and just ink the ends of both of the feathers. And then I have the Zing embossing powder from American Crafts. This is in the color gold, and it's a really pretty gold. It's my favorite embossing powder, and I'm just going to pour that right over where I inked the feathers with the Versamark and tap off the excess. And then I'm going to use my tweezers to pick one up at a time and then heat that embossing powder. And you can see how nice and metallic it turns once it is heated and set. Alright, and then you want to give those time to cool and dry. And I'm just kind of laying out how I want them to go on my card because I'm going to stamp my sentiment on there. First I'm going to tie them together at the ends with a piece of the May Arts Natural Twine, and I'll just tie a bow at the top. And they kind of like to move a little bit just because they're not adhered down to anything while you're tying it, so you just have to be careful so they don't slip out of the bow. And then I'm just going to take these Xyron, they're like glue dots. I'm not exactly sure what they're called. But then I'm going to apply it to the back of each feather, and I'm doing it right behind the area that is embossed so that it won't show through on the other side. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of my ATG gun and apply that right behind where the bow is. And then I'll just adhere that onto my watercolor piece. The sentiment stamp that I'm using is from the Alleyway Stamps. It's called Jibber Jabber. And I'm using the Thanks stamp in some tuxedo black memento ink, and I'm just stamping that right below my feathers. And then I have my white A2 size card base. And I'm going to use some 3D foam squares. And I'm going to apply quite a few of them to the back of this just because it was watercolor, and this way it'll help it from warping the card. Alright, and then my last step on the card is I'm going to apply some of these sequins. I'm using the smaller, they're just white sequins. I think they're 4mm size. And I'm just going to randomly scatter those on each side of the feather. And then I'll use my glossy accents to apply those down. And you can also use your Tombow Mono Multi Glue or the Multi Matte Medium to apply sequins. I found that they're all pretty much the same when it comes to gluing the sequins down, and they hold them really well. And then that is my finished card for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that you can get all of my latest videos. We'll see you next time. Bye!